And Dan, we are smoking again. Praise the Lord. We've got our cigars back.
Absolutely. Today, it is a nice Ave Maria Lionheart.
The Ave Marias are actually some of my favorite cigars.
Absolutely.
These are remarkable.
And they have phenomenal bands.
They have phenomenal bands. And for the longest time, a lot of Catholics I knew were like, I love the Ave Marias. And it was just, they just like the marketing.
Sure.
But the reality is these are actually superb cigars.
Yes.
They really are. So huge shout out to them. They have the Hail Mary in Latin on the box.
It's awesome.
So anybody that does that is a friend of mine.
Absolutely.
First of all, you're a friend of mine making cigars. Let's be honest. But then when you do that, it's like, what the heck, man? You're my bestie.
Well, it's funny because sometimes we'll get the priests that'll come in and they'll bring their cigars and they're almost like ashamed to pull out the cigar because it's got some sort of ridiculous demonic label on it.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah, I know.
I'm still going to smoke it, but you should definitely be ashamed of yourself.
Well, one of the things we're good at is making sure everybody stays humble, right? We keep track of everybody else. As long as we're not having to worry about that for ourselves.
That's right.
It's everybody else's problem, right? Yeah, no,
I think that's actually one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about today in this show is, it seems like there has been some challenges to stay humble in the Catholic media space. There's been a lot that's gone on really in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
And let's just call it a month, right? Let's just say the last month has been nuts.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is like I found myself, kind of sucked into the drama a little bit. I tried to be very busy doing other things, but I'm sure like many of the people that are listening to us right now, they get sucked in. Oh, what happened in this particular case or that particular case? And there's like 3 that come to mind for me right now that have happened just in the last month. And, it gives us all as Catholics, as people that are putting out content, whether there's many people listening to it or not, it just gives us that moment to say, okay, what is the pause? Is everything that I'm doing for the greater glory of God? And if it's for the greater glory of God, how do I stay humble? We were joking about that. How do I stay humble in this process? And how do I stay convicted to the beliefs of whatever it is? And stay mission driven too.
Yeah. I think, Dan, let's go a little deeper into that. The higher level of this conversation is, first and foremost, do we have a right to at least talk about these things, right? When something goes down and it's in our little niche community, right? We're a very much niche community here of traditional Catholics, right? Let's be completely honest. Thank God that community is growing, right? And much of it very organic, which I think is a great thing. But in our little small community, in our little small world, these things resonate and they're a lot louder than anything else that's going on.
That's
right. We've gotten news of a few celebrities recently that passed away. You and I were just kind of talking about that. One of them came down the line while we were recording the last episode. And so, you talk about it, right? And then you start talking about the individual and who they are. And we even offered a little prayer for some of these wild individuals because we're all in need of God's mercy, very much so. And we pray that everybody finds it. But when it's in our community, we're going to feel it a lot more. And we do feel it a lot more. And so, and again, we're in this new era where everything is now being discussed online.
Yes, it is a challenge.
I mean, it's just the nature of where we are in our world, in our times. Right. Everything is technology now. And everything is, at one time you didn't know what your neighbor was doing. And now it's like, no matter where it's happening in the world, we're aware of it.
Right. I recall, when we had Dr. Kwasniewski and he was talking about how some of the saints that we all venerate today, they for a long time didn't know who the Pope was. They didn't even know. Please send word of who the Pope is because we don't know. And today, the Pope might have said this or might have said that. And everybody's hanging on every word. And
well, let's be honest. It's like, did you see the way the Pope sneezed? I mean, we're just that deep in these things. And while the technology and the ability to communicate better and to be more aware can be a blessing, it can also be a colossal curse.
Absolutely.
And that's why you're seeing people that are like, I just want to go back to the way the world was in the 90s. Right. We didn't have internet yet, and we were just kind of less aware of these things. But we still had TV, and we still had radio, and we still had newspapers, and there were still plenty of things that were out there, right?
That's right.
And so now it's it's like on jet fuel at this point in time. So I think it's one thing to talk about it, and I think it's another thing to go a little further and turn it into just pure gossip.
That's right.
Right. And so I do think that as we're in this information age that we're in right now, we do need to just be cognizant of that as we go about whatever it is that we're doing. I think we have a right to say, hey, what are your thoughts on that? Right. But there is a line that can get crossed very easily.
Sure.
Right.
And these are opportunities for us to learn lessons. Take a look at, okay, why did something break down? I think one of the ones that we may talk about is, there's this young gentleman, and I really hadn't listened to him at all. The voice of reason. I think that's interesting that kids today give themselves new names. It's like Back to Prince. And the artist formerly known as Prince.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, it's weird.
Right.
I'm Dan, you're Marco, good enough.
Correct. We need to figure out
we got to come up with something.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Right.
But that whole scandal that kind of came out, there's an opportunity. Again, it's all yet to be, it's accusations. They seem to be pretty significant, pretty severe, and there seems to be some admission of things. But it lets us have a moment that says, hey, wait a second. Okay, if we're going to be in this commentating space, let's make sure that we understand the responsibility that we have.
Right.
And be careful that we're not chucking stones when we live in a glass house. And so I want to be very, very clear from what the accusations are. This is horrible. Yeah. This is I'm a father with young daughters. Absolutely horrible. And it's much like many things that have happened throughout history. When someone's in a position of trust, authority, that can get abused. And so we need to make sure as parents that we're still monitoring those things. As adults, that we monitor our relationships with other people.
Correct.
But I think there was learning there.
Well, I think you really hit it on the head as far as the status that this individual has, because he's going around and he's representing our faith as kind of the spokesperson for it, right? And if you're the guy that's going up against the Protestant to kind of have a debate, right? Or if you have your channel and people are following you and they're looking at you as the voice of Catholicism in that particular instance, then whether you realized it or not, you've just entered into a different dimension.
That's right.
You've now crossed the threshold into a higher level of expectation for your behavior.
That's right.
It is what it is, right? Nobody knows where that cross is. It over 500 episodes? Is it over 500,000? I don't know where it happens. But if you're putting yourself out there as that person who is representing the faith and defending it, guess what? You also have to probably act right in your personal life as well, right?
That's right.
To at least to a certain extent, or you're going to face some sort of a fallout, right? Mm-hmm. We saw something like that go down with Mel Gibson.
Yes.
Right. I mean, this guy had a big Catholic family, Orthodox, what have you. And then, there was a divorce. And then next thing you know, there's a girlfriend. And then there's a pregnancy. And it looked like kind of a train wreck. And in recent years, it seems that the man is trying his very best to restore as much as he can the damage. And to his credit, when you're up on that type of a level, I'm sure it's even harder. Yeah. Right. When you've got the money and the power and the fame and the this and the that, I'm certain it's more difficult. Absolutely it is for a man. So, there's still, though, there's some sort of an expectation. The guy was an actor, but because he put this movie out about Jesus that the world, resonated with so much, once again, you've kind of entered into a different category now.
And I think it's very important for us to say, there is forgiveness for those that seek it. There's redemption, and we pray for all those involved. Taking some time away from the limelight maybe is what's required.
Sure.
And then we have to take a look at it. If you are going to be in the space, you have to hold yourself, as you said, to a different standard.
Correct. Correct.
And
do you remember the Father Karapi fallout? Mm-hmm. Right. And so this was another situation where this priest, if you don't know, if you're younger and you didn't know, this guy was the celebrity priest of that time. And had this rough life and background, very worldly, and then became a priest, right? And in the early days, oh my gosh, I mean, anybody that you talk to, I still talk to people today, like, I really miss his stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was responsible for a lot of people that I spoke to said that guy was responsible for my reinvigoration of my faith.
Absolutely. And there was a lot of a scandal that was brought forth, but I know many people that say much of the accusations there were false.
Correct.
And it destroyed a man too. And if there were accusations that were true and there was someone that was harmed, that's different too. But I think that's what's really difficult is you have the two sides. You have the potential for great false accusations.
Correct.
And then you have the potential for a human being to fail.
Right.
Well, if we failed in the garden, and we have repeatedly failed throughout history, it's probably going to happen. But I think there's a moment. How do we make sure we don't put ourselves all the way out there, depending on who it is?
And how do we balance, Dan, this idea of, okay, I have a higher expectation for you because you are putting yourself out there, and just kind of understanding and reminding ourselves that this person, why would I be surprised that they fell when they are human and when they have that kind of a background, and when you've overcome that level of degree of evil? In the case I'm giving here of Father Crappy, I don't know Voice of Reason's background, but I'll bet money that it wasn't perfect, his upbringing, what have you. And so those demons are always in the closet, so to speak, and they're always trying to pull you down, especially if you're going to go and represent, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but I've seen lots of things that talk about this whole concept of the celebrity priest, or now I think we're in the new advent of there's more celebrities in the Catholic space that are not priests.
Right.
And again, that's kind of what these quote, I hate the term, but the quote influencers.
Sure.
And so I think at the end of it, it goes back to our original statement. Humility is so key. But again, that's a daily struggle.
It is.
It's a daily battle for every single human being. And the higher up you go in the spotlight, in the limelight, probably the harder that gets, right? So no matter who it is, when I see a person fall, whether it's Mel Gibson or whether it's a priest or whether it's a young influencer, there's always a little bit of empathy there. I can understand, or maybe even a little bit of sympathy, because I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it's hard.
Right.
I'm sure it is, especially when eyes are looking at you. But we've got to be mindful of these circumstances and these situations to overcome and to stay grounded and holding on strongly to Christ.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things it does for us is we get to say, okay, listen, we may think that it's very good. Let's be aware of what's going on. Let's definitely be informed, if you would.
Yeah.
But then there's a line that it can cross where you're like, no, I'm actually buying into it. I'm making this a bigger deal. The sin has now become mine because I'm into the gossip and I'm trying to make sure that I have an opinion and this and that. And I think that's where we can really make some big mistakes. And it's super easy because it can happen to any of us. You're like, oh, well, I read that one article. I wonder what this person says. And then it gets even worse, in the case of the young influencer, all of this stuff's getting put out on social media. And so you start in one place and then you end up down this other road and you're like, gosh, I have work to do.
And you know what? Let's touch on something that's not necessarily Catholic related, but I saw some Catholics who I respect chiming in on it. The last 2 weeks, unfortunately, or the last week and then beginning of this week, all I've seen on my news feed is about this couple that was at the Coldplay concert, this adulterous couple.
Yep.
Right. And all the fallout from that. And I saw a priest put out an article or a Facebook post saying that we're handling it wrong. We shouldn't be shaming them for it. And then somebody else came back and said, very respectable woman came back and said, we need to make sure that people understand that adultery is something that is, there's just no qualms about it. It's bad.
Well, it's bad, but I think one of the things that we have to think about, we were even talking about some of the celebrities that have died, one from a sitcom when we were a kid.
Right.
And, what are we watching? What are we consuming? Are we watching television shows that just makes adultery no problem? And then we wonder why something like this happens. And the only reason that thing blew up is, number one, that The Simpsons called it. That's a joke. I don't really know, but it is funny to read that.
Oh, my gosh.
And number two is that it was a high-profile individual that somebody else could take down.
Right.
But the idea that we are not offended with adultery, that tells us that there's a problem in our society.
Right.
So what are we watching for movies? What are we watching for television shows? Is it still got any moral stigma associated with it? Right. And I think that's the hard part. People are like, no big deal. If your buddy is in an adulterous affair, Do you call them out?
Right.
Do you still hang out with them?
Right.
Do
you almost support it in many ways, right?
That's what we've got for a big problem.
I'd be happy to go to your side piece, your Sancha's, y'all's wedding, and it's like, is that the right thing to do? You're supporting that. My concern in all those situations is always the fallout for the kids.
Sure.
Always. And then these people in this case are coming from extremely wealthy, affluent backgrounds. And my understanding was that both of them had already had at least one divorce behind them, at least one.
Yeah, it's sad.
Right. And so it's like, what a train wreck for the kids, trying to navigate all that. And now this whole thing is in the spotlight. Right. That's got to be super difficult for them.
Well, yeah. And then you can run down the road. It's just more gossip and more gossip. But, unfortunately, we have to take a look at what are we doing with our careers? Is our career so important that our family's getting left by the wayside? Do we buy into some other people go the other extreme? They buy into the lie that my family is just so important that what I need to do now is I need to be 100% with my family and I'm not even going to work anymore. So they're not able to pay the bills. That's a challenge.
Sure.
So there's lots of different ways that it can go.
Absolutely. Either way, the bottom line is there's a lot going on. There's a whole lot of things to navigate there, but we've got to stay grounded and focused on Christ. And some of these people, the example that I gave, I don't know where they're at, but most likely they're not taking any of that stuff seriously at all. And so let's kind of shift and navigate back to the Catholic world again. There were a couple of other incidents, right? That went on. Which one do you want to? Where do you want to go from there?
Well, the most recent one that came out, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about the challenge that happened with LifeSite News. We'll talk about that. We have a lot of good friends that are there. But recently we saw the Babylon Bee. Now, I guess it was that guy, like the president or CEO of Babylon Bee, that Joel Barry.
Yeah, I think so.
And, so he puts out that, the only Christians that are still there, they support Hamas and there's 200 and, it's just ignorance. But it brought up a great point. And I think that there were many out there, Taylor Marshall was one and others that came out and said, well, wait a second. They've actually been bashing Catholics for an awful long time.
Yeah, they have.
And listen, whether you're French Canadian, you're Italian, you're Hispanic, some of the things that are the funniest to us and the funniest to Catholics are when we make fun of ourselves.
Correct.
That is funny, and it's
Absolutely.
a satirical piece.
That's right. I think there's good that comes from some of that. You know what I mean? The whole purpose of satire is actually to raise awareness of a problem.
Right.
So they were saying something about, Catholics hoping that this Pope is actually Catholic, stuff like that. And it's like, do we laugh or do we cry?
Right.
But I don't mind that awareness.
Right.
I really don't. I really don't. And so I had the camera on you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's a better shot anyways. Well, I think you're right. And I think it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, well, as Catholics, where am I spending my money? And I think that's going to be a big lead into even the next conversation that we're going to have. I've been talking with people recently a lot about where do we put our money. It's something that's been big for me for an awful long time. And what we have to understand is that if we believe that there's a certain way that you should live your life, and we're going to live by Catholic principles, we're not going to do it perfect. Absolutely not.
Right.
But we should be striving to head that direction. So when you've got an organization like the Babylon Bee that puts it out and you say, hey, that's too far.
Right.
That's not cool. And then I think the biggest part is he doubled down on it and went further. Then we have to say enough's enough. I'm not supporting them with my energy. And we also have to be careful, even in this podcast, are we encouraging people to go out to the Babylon Bee and to read the article?
Yeah.
And so there's that quandary that we have.
Sure. Yeah. I just think, let's give a plug for the Nineveh Nat. That's a Catholic version. That's where you should be focused, is on an actual Catholic version. That way it's truly us, focusing on our own problems, right? As it should be, versus a Protestant trying to do it.
There we go.
Kind of a thing. So, there are other options is the point.
That's
but
right.
I've been a long time fan of the Bee, and I probably myself, I'll still continue to follow it. And if they post something that's a little bit offensive, it's not going to change my day. It's not going to change my beliefs. I know my faith and I know what it teaches, and I'm used to the Protestants talking trash. You know what I mean? And I kind of prefer just let's push back. Let's talk trash ourselves as Catholics. Let's have our own voice. Again, if you have a goal, a higher level goal of raising awareness
Yep.
to the problems that you have, I think that's one of the things I'm hoping to do with the Nineveh Nat is bring a little bit more attention to these other churches that are out there. I've got a bunch of them lined up for some of these local churches here in San Antonio that are more of that, the prosperity gospel and the stuff like that. It's so popular right now, right? There needs to be more awareness of where their shortcomings are, because people are so wrapped up in all of the glitz and the glamour and the stage and the music and all these things and all the emotion and all the feel good, that I really think that they've lost sight of what they're missing out on by not having what I think they've got one sacrament, baptism, right? Which most of the time they're just, they do like a weekly or a monthly baptism. People are just getting wet because they're already baptized. You know what I mean? And it's just, nothing's even happening. You're not getting rebaptized. Right. That's for sure. But that's the kind of stuff that I think we need to bring some of that stuff to light.
Oh, I think you're right. So, I mean, that was definitely another one. And then probably the biggest one that we've got to talk about today that a lot of people have really been affected by is kind of the implosion that's happened at LifeSite News. Now, full disclosure for everyone that's listening, I consider John Henry Weston a friend. He has been very good to the ranch. He is a good man.
Boy, has he.
Good family. And I don't know most of the details of anything. If there's something that maybe wasn't perfect, well, call that out, adjust it, do whatever. But I also want to say that I know a lot of people that are at LifeSite News. There's a lot of employees that are there, people that I've gotten to get to know. They've been very gracious to me. So that was a very sad situation. But it did bring to light some things that I think Catholics should start to think about. One of the areas that, probably about a month and a half ago, I wrote an article about another nonprofit that had some financial questionability to what they were doing. They've kind of lost their mission.
Yeah.
And if we get to the core of what was going on in LifeSite News, is there was a struggle internal from everything that I know and some of the inside people I've talked to. There was a struggle internal for where are we going with the news and what are we doing?
Sure.
Unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand boards actually have responsibilities.
Sure.
They have authority and they can do things. So they've got to handle that correctly. But there's a lot that they're responsible for, especially as it relates to donors.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was explaining to someone recently. At the end of the day, they're still essentially running a business. They still need to make business decisions sometimes. And some of those business decisions are going to be very painful.
Yes.
And very, very difficult. And then there's also, and I'm not saying that this is the case with LifeSite News or John Henry, but in plenty of those circumstances, there's more going on than what you see, right? And sometimes even, people can give a different impression up front than what's actually happening behind the scenes.
Sure.
And that's the reason it's like, oh, how dare you drop this person, what have you? Well, because you don't know all the details.
Right.
And so as Catholics, as outsiders to these organizations, we also need to be keeping these things in mind. Like, we don't know every single nuance of every single organization. Now, that being said, you still have the right to redirect your donations if you please. Mm-hmm. If you're like, that's my guy and I follow him wherever he goes, then God bless you, do that, right? And continue to follow. That's your right as well. But just, you should be mindful that you may not know the whole scope of the whole thing.
Well, and I think one of the things that I noticed about what came out afterwards is there was a lack of charity kind of on all fronts.
Sure. As there usually are.
And it's super sad. But, what are the takeaways? Again, not to be into the gossip or not to be in the drama. Number one, we have to take a look at, okay, if you are supporting a nonprofit organization, do you understand their mission? Do you know where the money's going? And do you give freely? Meaning, I believe that this is a good mission. I believe what they're doing is good. And I will state this right now. The work that LifeSite News is doing is important work. It was important work years ago when they started. It was important work at the turn of the COVID debacle that happened. And then it was important work yesterday, and it's going to be important work tomorrow. So if you're supporting them for that important work, awesome. If you have a slightly difference of opinion, that's good. But I think there were a couple things that came to mind. You have to take a look at it and, it is difficult today, especially for Catholics, to carve out where are we at. And having a new pope has been part of the challenge. Are we going to scrutinize everything he says? Are we going to give him a shot? I think that was part of the conflict that was there.
Yep.
And I think from my perspective, I have seen a lot with the new pope in bishop assignments that lead me to believe that it's kind of a continuation of what we had before.
Sure.
That is very concerning to me as a Catholic.
Right.
Putting bishops into places in Africa that are coming out against all of the other bishops, kind of to sway the political argument, which the church should believe what the church believes, and we should put it out there, and that should be it.
You have to.
But the other thing that I want to mention about, LifeSite News is being a nonprofit. I want people to understand too that it's not the end user donor that's making most of the decisions. Now, you definitely can have your money walk away, but you have to take a look at what overall is going. And if that's not exactly what you want to support, make sure that you go and do support. I think one of the things that we do as Catholics in all of these stories that we're talking about, we find the thing that we can attack and go, see, that's wrong. What they did is wrong. I would have done it differently. Well, one of the things that I want everybody to think about, if you are not an employer, if you don't have W-2'd employees, maybe take a breath before you argue what everybody else has to do, number one. Number two, it's an enormous organization. You have to take a look at that. And then you also have to see what is the drive behind it. So those are a lot of things that I wanted to throw out there to the table.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And again, at the end of the day, every one of these organizations, their goal is to continue to run and to thrive, right? Not to just barely get by or to, just kind of survive, right? And so if things are looking like it's not going the right direction, then sometimes adjustments need to be made. Aside from that, to your point a minute ago, is there something terribly wrong with continuing to call out something that we, the lay faithful, think is wrong, even if it is our Pope, even if it's the new Pope who is giving us hope again? But, a lot of people are like, I just want things to go back to the way it was a long time ago, where all I knew was the good. I didn't know any of the bad. And you treated your Pope almost like a rock star celebrity. Right. And I think that's actually a really faulty way of looking at the Holy Father as well.
I think that you're onto something right there. And that is, do we have a cult of personality?
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why when I started the Restoring Christian Culture podcast, where we did together, it was together. We're going to have Matthias on once in a while. We're going to have other guests on, because nobody cares about Dan Seveny or Marco Salinas. Nobody cares. Right. It's not our personality. So if you get an organization like a LifeSite News or a Church Militant before, or all of these other organizations, and it really becomes a cult of that personality of that one person, we've got a challenge.
Sure.
So it looks like we might be down to one camera now.
Hello.
For the remainder of this conversation. So Marco, you better have some good stuff.
Well, guess what? I'm going to actually see us out the door on that note right there. We covered, I think, the most important things that we needed to cover today, and we're almost at the 30-minute mark. So
yeah, it was a good conversation.
We're right where we need to be. So I think that'll do it. We are having some tech problems, but we're going to just sign out and say thank you for joining us as always. If you're looking for, here's my final plug, if you're looking for a great organization to support, I think I can recommend one, the Restoring Christian Culture Initiative. And to Dan's point a second ago, we can't do this without support. We need your support. So please check the link in our show description here and look at the website, and please prayerfully consider sponsoring the Restoring Christian Culture Initiative. You're only going to hear Dan's voice on this one, but thanks so much, Dan.
Hey, thank you. It's been great, Marco.
All right. We'll see you on the next one. God bless.
Take care.